Okay. Welcome to the July 17th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. This is a historic passing of the baton. We have 2 new commissioners here, and we've said goodbye to 2 others. So let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. And I guess, could you? Not yet? Okay. Roll call.
Commissioner Lambert.
Here.
Commissioner McKinnon.
Present.
Commissioner Pastor.
Here.
Commissioner Reese.
Here.
And Chair Fontenberg.
Here. Also would like to welcome Ying back from her maternity leave, and sounds like it was a blast. Then we have our director's report.
Nope, swearing in.
Oh, swearing in first?
They're swearing in first, right there on
Okay.
the agenda.
Yep, you're right. You're absolutely right.
If you and the 2 new commissioners would raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Oh, wait, I'm supposed to
I.
handle this.
Aye.
Your name.
Mario
Idrissa Pastor,
Fonda-Bernardi.
Do solemnly swear or affirm
Do
solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution
That
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the
of the
United
United
States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of California,
of the
of the
State of California.
California,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the Planning Commission.
the duties of the Planning Commission.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, director's report.
Good evening, Commission. Welcome to our new commissioners, and also want to welcome Jing back and thank Roxanne for her work while Jing was out. Coming up on your agenda, August 7th, we have a special meeting that will start at 6 p.m. On that agenda, we have the R1 update, as well as a map and major modification at 618 5th Street. The next meeting in August is August 21st. We have that night a couple of appeals of fence wall hedge modifications, 211 11th Street and 723 Ozo. Also a map at 630 15th, and then another map and major modification at 2501 2nd Street. And then upcoming at City Council on July 23rd, 2 landmark-related issues. One is a 4th Street Historic District, which is basically the area around 4th and Ocean Park Boulevard. Appeal of a district that was not approved by landmarks commissioners because they're, I think they did not have a quorum, or I'm not sure. Failed to act. So based on that, it's now before the City Council. And then also 808 Wood Acres is another landmark appeal. And then that same evening, the DA monitoring annual report. And that concludes my report.
Any questions for the director?
I don't, it's not really a question, and I'm sure I don't need to say this to you, but I'm going to do it anyway. On the R1 item in August, I would encourage you, which again you're probably going to do anyway, to make sure that those who are participating in the R1 task force have enough a copy in advance enough to make comments on it.
Yeah, we've gotten requests from various groups to have the report out as soon as we can, and we will do that. We've strived to have it out for 2 weekends, so that there's plenty of time for review, and
Cool.
try
Great.
to do that
Thank
in this
you.
case.
I also just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be testifying Tuesday night on the Wood Acres landmarks appeal,
Oh, okay.
because John Parkinson is one of my idols.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
couple of questions. Mr. Martin, so today I had this incredibly interesting briefing about aerial gondolas in the city of Santa Monica, and the gentleman was talking about mobility and how he'd briefed the city, including the city manager and Francie Stephan. And it reminded me that mobility is one of the sort of key issues that I've been interested in. And I may have asked you, I think, 19 times in a row, whether we are going to have a mobility briefing here at the Planning Commission. And there is some urgency because I'm leaving the commission in 2020, and I'm just hoping that we could have it before then. So
Okay.
when do you think we will have that briefing?
So I will need to coordinate with Francie and figure out when we can bring that to the commission, but we will get it to you before 2020 for sure.
And I certainly appreciate that, because that is in fact the answer you've given me 2 or 3 times previously, and I guess, just so you know, that is wearing thin at this moment. So I'm hoping at the next meeting you have a date and a time that's not too far in the distance.
Okay, understood.
I would appreciate that. Are we going to have a meeting in September, in the early part of September, after Labor Day? Okay, whatever it is, but we're back on a routine.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I also have a question in terms of a progress report, similar to what Commissioner McKinnon was asking for. We had discussed the possibility of getting a seismic update on where we are in the process of upgrading our city and the 1,500 properties that may be at risk.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
same thing.
We're trying to schedule that as well.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one more question. I understand that the council a month or 2 ago approved an application for state funding under SB2 for looking at the housing policies programs, and specifically the AHPP and the inclusionary program, to see whether they're working, whether they could produce more housing. Does that mean that the look at the downtown inclusionary program is going to be when all that happens, which could be God knows from now?
Yes. So the idea is that we already have direction to look at the boulevards in the
Right,
Bergamot
right.
area. So the SB2 grant would allow us to also look at the downtown and the standards in the DCP as part of that same process, or around the same time.
So the schedule for the grant is, we are actually, it's in internal review right now, but we will submit the application pretty soon, and a decision will be made. I think it's like a September deadline, or we'll know whether we were successful in obtaining the grant in September. And our timeline, has us moving pretty quickly forward with it. We're hoping to have, the scope established by the fall, and then get working on it. I believe that was council's direction and interest in having this work done expeditiously. So that's the
Here's
plan.
2 things. One is, are you going to do a bidding process for the consultant?
For
Because this is a lot of money. If the SB2 comes through, it's a great deal of money. So I would assume you're going to go out to bid for a consultant.
At the moment, we have the contract for HRNA, right, for the first part of this, which was the
Right,
HPP review. They did do the work prior, and we have certainly taken input in terms of the scope of that work, and reviewing with our partners in HED, and I think we'll be talking with the Housing Commission as well.
I guess my concern, having come from a couple public agencies, that we're talking about something like, I can't even remember, it's an enormous amount of money that you're
Yeah.
applying for.
I don't think we've made a decision
Yeah,
as to whether it's a.
I mean, you
it's
can't
bid or
increase a
it's sole
contract without a
source.
bidding at that level of funding, in my experience. Whether you're going to do that or not, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that.
The other issue I have is I would hope that the downtown inclusionary program would be first out of the gate, because there are a number of people in the community, including me, who are very skeptical about the workability of what we adopted. And so I would hope that would be a very high priority for the consultant. I assume that's the city council's call, not ours. But
Right. Yeah, there's also, as you know, concern about Wilshire and Bergamot and projects there as well. So it's prioritizing which one we do first or in what order, but I understand your comments.
so public input would probably help in that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, no further questions? Okay, there are no minutes, and there's no statements of official action.
Planning Commissioner announcements.
Planning.
So I was not here at the last meeting, and I did not want the departure of 2 of our commissioners to pass without making a comment. Commissioner Anderson served for a very long time and had a very strong voice, and it was a voice that we didn't often hear in this Planning Commission, but she stuck to her views about the way urban areas should develop, and she was an expert on housing, and I think we will miss that voice as time goes by. And it's important to note that she was here, and her role was a very strong role. Commissioner Parry, I spent a lot of time talking to over the last few years. He was out on the sort of left wing like me, and particularly after he also had a concussion. We finally spoke the same language together for a long time, but he was a very calm and very polite influence, never more so than at that public meeting at Lincoln Middle School where I think 300 angry residents were shouting at us all night long, and I don't think he ever blinked. And a remarkably able person that also made the comment on my first meeting that you don't need to be an expert at everything, you just need to be expert at some things and carry through with it. And I think, again, we will miss his influence. Commissioner Rees, excellent to have you back. I knew when I saw you across the road one night, walking your dogs and looking at the town hall while a meeting was on, that you would be coming back to join us. And it's wonderful to have you here.
And I am sorry that I pushed you to the right.
Yeah, don't worry. And Commissioner Pastor, as a land use attorney, we welcome you here, although the game changes once you're on this side of the room. And we're off to the races, I guess, is the best way to put it. The things I would note, there are two things that I want to note, though. For the time that I've been on the commission, and I think for a very long time before that, this is the first time that we have 7 or 6 commissioners that live south of the freeway. One commissioner lives north, that's me. So we have no one who lives north of Michigan or 2nd and Ocean Park Boulevard. So I promise to represent the best of the city as best I can. And we also have 6 property owners and me as a renter, so I'll represent the 70% of the city that's a renter here this evening. So it's a new commission, a new day has dawned.
Okay, thank you. Okay, consent calendar. We're on to item 8A, and we have 2 chits to speak. Could you give us the staff report?
Okay. Good evening, planning commissioners, new and old. I'm Liz Barrell, senior planner, and I'm just going to... All right. Just going to struggle with the microphone, and then I'm going to just give you a very brief oral report. We don't have a PowerPoint for this one. Mm-hmm. It's a resolution of intention, and it's to bring forward a hearing at which the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the City Council on 2 things. One are some changes to the general land use designation map, and the other is some changes to the zoning map. And the changes that will be brought forward to you are for the sole purpose of ensuring consistency between the general plan and the zoning map. This has been known to us for a long time that here and there are properties. Every once in a while they come up as planners are reviewing things, and we realize that there are properties where the 2 do not coincide, and it's not a good thing. In January, the state legislature actually passed a amendment to the, I don't have the section here, but to the state code, requiring that charter cities have consistency between their general plans and their land use and their zoning ordinances. And while we've always pretty much tried to do that, now we actually have a state mandate to do that. So we thought this was a good time, and there was availability finally on our work plan to do this, that we would do this, bring forward these proposed amendments. And the process by which we came to this list, which has been put into 2 exhibits just to differentiate between the idea that one is an ROI for a general plan amendment and one is an ROI for zoning amendment, zoning map amendment. So we got to this list of properties by doing a GIS run and comparing the 2 and seeing where the 2 did not were not consistent, and then looking at those and seeing, which of those need to go forward. Some of them were small slivers of portions of city-owned land, and we haven't really brought those forward. But those that were privately owned and or full parcels are on this list. So again, tonight is just the resolution of intent for the Planning Commission to basically direct staff, like, yes, we want to have this hearing, and that's where we're at tonight.
I have a question. So, Liz, I have a couple of properties that I'd like to rezone. Commissioner Lambert's house, for
House?
example.
Yeah, R4 is fine for me.
R7 in your
You can
case.
apply. We have a really high fee, but go ahead.
So, one of the issues with this report, though, is that it's not really self-explanatory as to why properties are being reallocated zoning. And I imagine that if I'm a property owner, at some point I'm going to get a letter which says we're about to rezone your property, and at that stage my heart's going to miss a beat. And are we going to explain it? How are we going to move forward in such a way that these 70 properties or 80 properties don't automatically go into uproar and every other community group the same way?
Right. So.
Because it's not immediately apparent, to be honest, even despite your explanation.
Okay. We are going, of course, to be sending letters to all of the property owners on this list, and we will be explaining to them what their property is zoned on the general plan, or what it's designated on the general plan, and what the zoning is. And because of the inconsistency, we're going to be making a proposal. We haven't worded that yet. Actually, we wanted input from you all tonight, if you'd like to, about that public outreach process and about the best, about language that we should include. But it will be clear why they are on this list. It's not some random,
But some of these people's designations have been different for 60 years.
True.
So at that point, they're going to go, but I'm entitled to do this and you're changing my designation. How will you handle that?
We will handle each case as it comes up. Some of the ones that have been inconsistent for 60 years have properties where the use hasn't changed either. They may not even be aware of it.
I know, but you're going to alert them in the most draconian way. You're going to say, in X amount of days, a planning commission hearing will be held to change the zoning on your property. Won't they immediately start to retain lawyers? Because I would.
Well, I don't think that's the way we would say it, for one thing. For another thing, the outcome on all of these properties is that one map or the other is not changing, right? It's not a case where you're today residential, tomorrow you're commercial. Today you're commercial and residential by accident, right? So you're changing back to one or the other. You're not going to have a property that really changes. We're correcting errors.
Can I put it to you this way? I was surprised when this arrived, and my surprise is not backed by owning a couple of $1 million of property whose zoning is about to change. I can only imagine what will happen at Commissioner Lambert's house when the designation arrives, which says, you think you're R3, but in fact we're changing you to healthcare mixed-use low, or whatever it is, because that's what some other map says.
Right.
So Commissioner McKinnon, if I can address that issue. So this is not, to be very clear, this is not a comprehensive rezoning or redesignation, to opening up the entire general plan. We did that 10 years ago, with the adoption of the loose, right? So what we are bringing up is in the course of our day-to-day work, we occasionally receive public inquiries about, hey, what's the zone on this property, what have you. And, I think over time we've noticed it was just, little properties here and there that were flagged by staff as like, oh, it looks like this is inconsistent. Well, let's just jot this down. And, given our capacity and priorities, we just didn't, we knew about some of these, but we just didn't bring them forward right away. We just said, well, we'll bring this forward when we're able to. And with the passage of SB 1333, with a mandate to have consistency, and actually the staff time to do it now, we went through the exercise of doing this. 50 parcels within 23,000. These are genuinely, sometimes parcel lines change, sometimes tax ID numbers change. This is kind of how these things happen sometimes. So this is really the purpose is to reconcile and bring consistency, establishing again that we have had these discussions. We have had these discussions in the general plan in the course of that citywide. So, the explanation will be provided to property owners that this is really to bring consistency with what the council has already established. as land use designations throughout the city. The reason that you see in Exhibits A and B, and it may not be apparently clear right away, but we had to present it this way, is that the addresses you see in Exhibits A and B are actually exactly the same. And, it would be irresponsible of us to only allow this commission to have a full discussion either way. By listing it this way, it gives you the option in the future to discuss it either way. I will say there's not been any full analysis on this. It's completely at the discretion of the commission of whether, you go one way or the other. You want it to be consistent with the general plan or zoning. That's, I want to be clear, that is not, we're not making a recommendation at this point. This is simply just identifying, hey, there's an inconsistency here. What would you like to do about this? Given, again, that history that the Luce did establish many years ago, right, that this is the appropriate land use designation, because we did go through that parcel by parcel review at that time.
I mean, it seems when you contact the owners, go ahead, calling on me, that you might let them know, and I'm not sure if this opens a door you don't want to open, that if they are unhappy, if there's a downzoning involved, that they have the option of asking for a general plan amendment.
I mean, this is a public process.
Right.
Absolutely.
So they could ask for a
so
general plan amendment
absolutely
if they're
they can.
really, really upset.
Mm-hmm.
My issue is and I haven't looked at this list exhaustively, of whether we're losing housing production potential by doing this.
Again, it's not something
we don't know
yet. It was not the scope. Like, I just
I
want to say that
understand.
again. Yeah, it was really to correct.
When it comes back, we'll be looking
Yeah,
at that.
absolutely. You can, if you want to look at that information, we were happy to provide that.
Well, we talked a little bit about SB 330, and if it passes, but frankly, we will have done this before January 1st, so we won't be bound by SB 330, which is, if I read it correctly, it says that you can't downzone if it reduces housing production potential.
Right. And because this is a consistency action, one or the other map will not be changing. So it's not really the kind of downzoning you were thinking about. Although, and I'm sure property owners, some of them will come forward to these hearings to say which of the two designations they think is the appropriate one for their property, or that they have operated under the understanding that that's the designation they have. I'm sure some will have that input.
Leslie.
Hing, I think you answered my question, which was, has staff analyzed each of the parcels yet and just looked at whether or not they're going to go with the general plan designation or the zoning designation? It sounds like you haven't. And
No, yeah. The usually the way this works is we start with the ROI, then the next step would be a policy discussion with the commission where we will bring back information on each parcel. We've attempted to provide the cursory information here in terms of general plan, land use, and existing use. If there's interest in additional information, please do let us know. But we're going to have that policy discussion at a future meeting.
And is that also, when you think about what are the factors that you look at when you're making a recommendation, and I think Commissioner Lambert brought up a good one, which is production of housing, and also whether it's up to zoning or down zoning.
Yep.
That those are both things that I would certainly like you all to take into consideration when you're considering that. And if there are other policy guidance, I think it would be helpful for us to understand some of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Let's hear from our public. We have two chits. So Ellen Hannon and Zena Joseph, 3 minutes each.
Good evening. I'm Ellen Hannon, 1218 9th Street. I'm with the Santa Monica Mid-City Neighbors. Our board met last night, and we were extremely confused by this. We've been to a number of meetings over years and years and years, way back when Elaine was in charge. So we're just totally confused about why this is being changed now, especially with Mid-City Neighbors, which our border is Lincoln Boulevard. And if you look at this is not a minor thing. This is Wilshire Boulevard. This is Lincoln Boulevard from Wilshire all the way to the freeway that there will be possible changes on. And we were told, and we've asked for year after year after year, that there be a setback along Lincoln to our residential neighborhood of Mid-City Neighbors on 9th Street. We are terribly burdened by just the traffic on Lincoln, as everyone north of the city is, but also our alley is a main alleyway for all of the utilities going to the north. And it is constantly being blocked by trucks, by commercial people serving the commercial buildings on Lincoln Boulevard. So we have multiple problems along there that have never really been considered. And we would like to make sure that that area of Lincoln gets the lowest priority of, we want housing. We tried to get rid of the A-lots, make the A-lots go back to housing throughout the years in our discussion, and we were ignored about that. And now we also would like to make sure that we are protected from that downtown core in our residential neighborhoods. That is one of our main things. We want to protect our little streets that are between Wilshire and Colorado from crosstown traffic, from people parking huge trucks for deliveries, auto deliveries and different things. They park right on Lincoln Boulevard, the auto deliveries. And so we would really like these type of things to be considered when you're going to talk. If you're going to talk about each property individually, you are talking about each little property from Wilshire down to Lincoln. And some of those, like the Vons, is a major property. So I would like to have more information before we go on, and I think you should have some outreach to the city residents, not just to the property owners, but to the people like me who live on 9th Street that borders and have to go through this every day. Because we're the people who do vote, and we are the people who are very angry right now with the way the city has, taken away our murals, doing all kinds of things without citizen input. Thank you.
Okay. Zena?
Thank you. Welcome to Commissioner Pastor, and welcome back to Commissioner Reese. Welcome back to Jing. I sent you an email yesterday on behalf of the Friends of Sunset Park Board. It was drafted by our Land Use Committee Chair and had a number of comments and questions on it. I hope you had a chance to read it. There are 18 Sunset Park neighborhood addresses on the list. I haven't had a chance to drive by all of them yet, but one address was very familiar, caught my attention. It's on page 5 of the staff report, 2919 Lincoln Boulevard. It says low-density housing, split R1, R2, multi-unit residential, recently constructed with access from Ashland Avenue. This address was also on the 2013 A-lot list. According to the yellow pages, it's the address for Lincoln Pipe and Plumbing Supply, but a few years ago, that same address referring to the landlocked parcel above Lincoln Pipe was combined with 802 Ashland for a 10-unit apartment building on a vacant, where previous zoning ordinance would have allowed no more than 4 units. The nearby residents appealed it, but they lost the appeal. I believe Jason and Jennifer were on the commission at that time, perhaps Richard. I received an email from Rachel Kelly, who lives adjacent to that property on 10th Street. She said, perhaps you recall the trash pickup debate. Their rollaway bins are being hauled all the way up Ashland to 10th Street and left at the red zone curb on the corner. I saw trash guys and asked him why we had 2 pickups from the red zone, because we already have Tuesday for our street rather. It's a visibility and physical hazard to drive around or turn right out of 10th Street onto Ashland when bins are present. They said Monday's pickup is for the new building down the street. I said, yes, but their pickup is supposed to be in front of their building. And the reply was, oh no, it's too steep to have a pickup there. This is a project that was approved by the Planning Commission. The appeal was overturned despite all of the objections that nearby residents had. And now we see it on this list. I don't know why. And it's like a stick in my eye to see that address once again, because it was so controversial. And it was described by the architect as an Italianate village. People on 10th Street have a 90-foot white wall with 1 3-foot opening in the middle. That's the Italianate village that they're now looking at from their backyards. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any discussion about this item? Yes. Go ahead.
I have a suggestion for staff that maybe in our community outreach in the next iteration of this, we have some maps so we can visibly see, right, that is it really how much of Lincoln is it, how much of Pico is it, and I think that would be a useful tool for everyone.
Jim?
Somewhat ironic that the first item back from the commission is zoning inconsistency and the controversy that this created the last time. So I'd like to, hopefully we can do this as expeditiously and as transparently as possible. So I really urge us to, not only reach out to the property owners and maybe do it more than once, because how many times have we been at hearings, whether it's here or in our professional life, where people say, I never got the notice. So we really need to make sure people are getting that notice. Making sure all the neighborhood organizations have access to this material. And when we come back, if we choose to move forward with this and it comes back to us, it would seem to me that the information shows us what the current zoning is, what the current land use is, what the current use is, when it was built, because we need to know, is this something that was done last 10 years is going to be here for 50 more, or something this is ripe for redevelopment. But I just urge us to be as transparent and open about this as possible, because I remember it will get very touchy.
So I have a great deal of concern about this because, like Jim, we lived through the last round of zoning changes on A and R lots, and every single one of them was a highly contested, highly argued discussion about why this had happened, why this didn't happen, what it should be, what it might be, what it could be, etc., etc. It went backwards and forwards. And so we go through the summer and suddenly that pops onto the agenda. Here's 70 or 80 lots, whatever it is, around the city on the edges of the downtown community plan that are either misallocated, have been for 60 years, 50 years. There are district changes that run through lots. And we've had a couple of these in the last year, but they had almost full-scale hearings. I think there was one on 26th Street where there was a district that ran between the two, and we had to get a variance, and we could go on. And they are in themselves major hearings, standalones, and yet suddenly tonight we've got 72, or whatever it is, to move forward. And it's a very sketchy community outreach that's suggested here that we'll send a letter to property owners. As I say, I think that when you're sitting there and you're on a piece of property, you want certainty about what that is, what district it's in, what it means, what you can do, what you can't do, what your obligations are. And so I think the community outreach needs to be incredibly significant if we move forward on it this evening. As Jim has pointed out, almost inevitably people will say, I didn't get that letter, and you had a hearing and you have changed my property. In the previous go-round on Montana, we had a property that the now Vons, but Pavilions, there was a residentially zoned lot in the middle of their commercial, and we went backwards and forwards about what that should be or might be or could be. And so none of these are easy changes, really, and yet it's just seeped out into the ether as if it's a done deal and we'll just move forward on it. And that is the way it will seem to the people who are the receiving ends of these letters, that for the first time are being told the property that you have bought under certain circumstances is not what you think it is. So that level of concern I hope I'm transmitting to you. I hope that when we are looking at a hearing, it's not a month or 2 months, but 3 or 4 months away, that you might even possibly have community meetings that follow at least several letters to each of these property owners. We don't want anyone surprised moving forward. And then the information that's contained when it does come back to the Planning Commission needs to be incredibly detailed. And some may disagree, but it's not an insignificant thing that we're doing here.
Why are you looking at me?
Only because you're tapping your fingers, rolling your eyeballs and making
Practicing
noises.
my piano.
Yeah. So I think that's the starting point from my perception at this stage. A high degree of concern about this. And I'd almost prefer that you bring forward the community outreach plan before you moved forward. I mean, do you have any thoughts about what you're going to do on that? And perhaps you could outline those at some stage. Okay, I'm finished. I'm just waiting for something to happen now.
I would just add to Jim's list about information also what happened in the last go around in terms of the change and why we think it didn't get changed, or what was the use and what was the planned use. And I'd like to know the history of all of that. And that's something that I think the neighbors should know as well.
Yes, I agree with Commissioner McKinnon. I know. That
My heart can take it.
I know, and you've got a weak heart. That it would be good to see a community outreach plan before we proceed. But I also want to say that I have a lot of confidence in staff, certainly based on what we've seen over the past few months in terms of the PICO neighborhood and the R1 process, that you really do a phenomenal community outreach program. So I have confidence, but I think it'd be good to see it. I wasn't here for the A lot battle. Was that the same situation where you're bringing zoning and consistency with a loose, or was that a different situation?
In my memory, it was very similar to what we're hearing with this today.
Yeah, it also involved parcels where the loose redesignated A lots, for example, to commercial.
Also,
And the zoning was still residential. So in some cases, those went back to a residential land use designation and land use or zoning designation. So that so they would match up.
but back then we weren't required by state law to be consistent with the loose in the zoning code, correct?
We weren't
We chose to do it.
We were trying to do that.
We were trying to do it, but now this is not
Yeah.
an option. I mean,
Exactly.
we
Now
are
it's
required
a
by
state
state
law.
law to bring the zoning code into compliance with the loose or change the loose. Those are our two options. I really, and I haven't looked at the list and the changes that may happen or not. I really don't want to see any situation where a lot is changed to the point of reducing housing capacity. I will be very unhappy if I saw that.
Okay. Any other discussion points?
Yeah, just the last comment is I just want to urge the community to understand that what staff has asked us to do is they brought an agenda item that says we should consider this, and if you agree with us, then we'll go out and do the analysis. So there's no done deals tonight. We're not making any decisions. You folks have a large network out there, and I hope that you would use it to clarify that this is a process just beginning and that there is nothing happening at this point nefarious, and we will urge them to all stay very attuned to this issue.
I'm going to ask a final question of Liz. So, Liz, you have in your mind a process. What is in your mind that you could let us know this evening?
Well, I mean, we don't, as we said, we don't have the fully developed recommendations, right? We've identified, we've looked at what exists on each of these properties, and that's in the staff report. And assuming that this resolution is passed tonight, we're going to look at each of these properties and look at what's going on the properties and contact the property owners. And I'm thinking that our outreach will involve a two-way outreach, not just here's a letter, see you at the hearing. It's much more of a, here's the situation and we'd like your input. And I think we can do an outreach process to those property owners where we specifically request their response so that they can tell us their thoughts about their property, and so that we can take that into account. And we will do that. I think we hear the Planning Commission. That sounds like what you would like us to do, and we can do that. We'll probably, I think we had a schedule on the staff report. It might get pushed back longer so that we give people more opportunity to give that input. But that's important. And we'll go from there. And
Okay, let me summarize. So there are 50 properties that are in play.
50,
And,
yeah.
well, I'm sorry?
About 50, right?
Yeah. And that's a very small number of properties in relation to the overall city. It's 0.2% of 1%.
Oh.
But it is very important to those people who own those properties or who are tenants there.
Right.
And you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted, for accuracy, there are 50 individual addresses here, but there's also a couple of areas that are just within the downtown community plan where the general plan isn't downtown core, right? So it's not the same as DCP and downtown core go together. So there's those two transition areas, and the thought with those areas is simply to rezone them as downtown core. That would not change the downtown community plan at all.
Okay. But there's also obviously a concern whether this can be done in the time frame we're talking about.
Probably not.
And that would obviously be something that you would bring us back and keep us up to date on how far you're getting with whatever rollout that you're actually going to have,
Yes.
given all the concerns that have been expressed.
Right.
So
I'm sure that will come in the director's
I think it's
report.
very doable. I think it is important to bring these properties into consistency now when very few of them are in some sort of development process. You want to handle all these inconsistencies
Right.
when the situation is neutral, because once the train leaves the station, it's very hard to pull it back in. So I think it's a good thing to do, and I think you should just proceed and do it. I imagine what's going to happen between when you have 50-odd things, they're going to cluster into groups. There's going to be these properties who got erroneously appropriated. These are the ones that have historical uses going way back. There's not going to be 50 special cases. There's probably going to be 10 general cases, and we just need to decide every property fits into this particular situation or that particular situation. So with
think you're
that,
right.
I would like to call the question. And could I have a motion?
I move that we adopt and send on to City Council the resolution of intention. Do I have to say more than that?
Okay. Any further discussion?
So, who seconded it?
Reluctantly, I'll second that.
Why-
Just
why-
nervous about the process. That's why I say reluctantly,
Yeah.
but I second it.
Okay. Okay. Let's have a roll call vote.
You can actually do a voice vote on
We can do a
this.
voice vote? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion carries.
Could I just add one thing? Please don't blow us up. Don't make everybody start shooting at us in 2 months or 3 months because we rush the consultation or you don't do enough community stuff. This is an extremely nerve-wracking process. It's something we've flipped to you to do a good job. Please. I know you will, but
Okay. Item 9A, which is 423 and 429 Ocean Avenue. We do not have any chits on that.
Disclosures?
Any ex parte communications?
I was very involved in this project when I was on the Landmarks Commission. This has been around for a very long time. So 5 years, 6 years. So I've been to the site many times, and I've talked to the development team many times.
All right. Roxanne?
Good evening, Commissioners. Roxanne Tanamori, Principal Planner. This presentation is going to be quite short for you. Happy to answer questions for you, but the item before you is a request to approve a vesting tentative tract map, actually a revision to a map that was approved by the Planning Commission in conjunction with a 12-unit condominium project. Planning Commission reviewed this and approved the project back in June of 2017. The request before you was for a vesting tentative tract map for the addition of 2 units to the originally approved project for a total of 14 units. There's no changes proposed to the original parcel coverage and building height allowances that were approved by Planning Commission as part of its development review permit variance and certification of an EIR back in June of 2017. The proposed addition of the 2 units fits within the previously approved building footprints. And as noted on the slide and in your staff report, the 14-unit project is still less than the 25 units permitted by code on this property as outlined back in 2017. This particular request for the addition of the 2 units is specifically and only in response to a Coastal Commission requirement for the addition of the 2 units as a condition of its approval of a coastal development permit for the project. And this project, as you know, incorporates a designated city landmark. There's new construction as well as the retention of some components of a colonial revival landmark apartment complex. And this particular revision to the project, as represented in the map, doesn't change those development parameters other than the 2 units. Also wanted to note that at the time Planning Commission reviewed the project and approved it, the certification of the EIR was done. Staff did look at the revision, and there are not any additional environmental impacts that are created from the addition of these 2 units. There is parking provided. That was a question we had received from some members of the public who inquired, as well as from the neighborhood group. North of Montana also inquired about the why, and the once we had a chance to talk with neighbors around the property and also to the neighborhood group, it was understood why this application was being brought forward. Also wanted to note that the 2 additional units represents the work of the applicant working with coastal staff initially. This request came about vis-a-vis a recommendation of denial from coastal, indicating that there wasn't enough density proposed in this project. Their preference was that it matched the 16 units existing on the site. However, recognizing the long process this project went through, a multi-year project process and environmental analysis as well, it was determined that the 2 units could fit within the original development parameters without disturbing that. The Coastal Commission ultimately did approve the project with this condition of the project being a total of 14 units, thus the map in front of you. So based on that, staff is recommending approval of the map based on the findings in your staff report, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
I have one very quick question. I assume this doesn't affect the number of affordable units on site? This additional
It creates
2?
an increase, actually, based on it creates an increase in the obligation based on the numbers proposed, the total number of units proposed.
I can't hear you.
It creates an increase in the obligation based on the 14 units.
They're doing on-site, though, aren't they?
They are, yes.
So is there an additional affordable unit as a result of these 2 units?
Yes, there is.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
That will be memorialized in the development review file. That's an issue that's been calculated.
Okay. No additional questions for staff? Thank you. And let's see, the applicant's team, would you like to say something?
Good evening, commissioners, and welcome to the new commissioners. My name is Alicia Bartley with Law Offices of Gaines and Stacy, and we have been the representative of the applicant since the beginning of this process many years ago. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and we have our civil engineer here, Harvey Goodman, and the owner, a representative of the owner here, Harry Wu, is here as well, and we are here to answer any questions.
No questions? Good sign. So that closes the public hearing, and there's no comments or rebuttals, so we're on to discussion. If there is no controversy here, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve. I don't have my glasses, so I can't read it. I shouldn't have said that. Move the staff recommendation granting the tentative tract map provision. Is that good enough?
19 ENT.
What?
19 ENT.
19 ENT.
Okay, there's been a motion. Do we have a second? Yes, okay, we have a second. Is a roll call vote?
Yeah. Commissioner Lambert? Commissioner McKinnon?
Yes.
Commissioner Pastor?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
Yes.
Chair Frauda Bernardi?
Yes. Okay, could I have a motion then to approve the statement of official action? Going once, going twice.
I move the statement of official action for this project.
Okay, second. Okay. Roll call vote?
Commissioner Lambert?
Yes.
Commissioner McKinnon?
Yes.
Commissioner Pastor?
Yes.
Commissioner Reese?
Yes.
Chair Frauda Bernardi?
Yes. Motion passes. There's a 14-day appeal period, and I want to commend you for your patience and endurance and stamina in dealing with this project. It'd be nice to see it built. So congratulations. Okay, future agenda items. Anything anyone would like to bring up?
There was an issue that I never really quite understood the answer to when I was on the commission before, and I really want to fight for it, but wider sidewalks. How do we get wider sidewalks? Because I walk by certain areas in the city, like the new Mini Cooper dealership. It's got a pretty nice little wide sidewalk there compared to the rest of the city, and I think that's really what helps us make a walkable city. And I compare that to I walk by Memorial or the Woodlawn Cemetery, and you can barely walk by there if you're with two people. So I'd really like to try to analyze how it is we can extract wider sidewalks.
Well, of course, that night, the Mini dealership, we spent, 4 hours on 6 inches. That's pretty slogging work. You led us that night. Yes, and Jennifer Kennedy memorialised, but it was hard work. That was a DA.
All I know, however we got there, it's a much better product with a wider sidewalk.
Totally with you.
And just to make you feel better, we did have a lot of sidewalk discussions on the downtown plan, and Nina was leading the charge for 14-foot sidewalks. So they're coming. They just come slowly. Okay, any other?
I have one, and this is not urgent, I don't think. Maybe staff feels it is, but there is rumbling in the community that after the R1 standards are adopted, they're coming in for hedge revisions. So looking at the city's hedge situation, which is, I don't want to say it's out of control, but it's close. So some revision to how we deal with hedges, whether we don't allow exceptions or, whatever. I'm not even sure how to formulate what I'm talking about, but hedges are an issue.
Commissioner, in what way? You mean people don't think the current rules are
Well, there
right?
are a lot of people who have broken rules. There are a lot of very tall hedges out there that are not being called on. And I don't know if the staff really, if we have staff to enforce it. And it's only on complaint, right? So I'm not really sure what the end result is, but I know people in Noma are very upset about what's going on north of Montana and the Fort Apache mentality to front yards. It's a big issue for Nina, and she's not here, so I should let her speak for herself.
Okay, any further items? Richard?
No, except it's great now Commissioner Reese is here, we finish a lot earlier. He was always very keen on that when he was on the commission. And the other thing I'd note is that our expert on mobility, Commissioner Landis, is currently looking into mobility in Bulgaria on an 8-day biking tour. So and Slovakia as well, yeah. So he'll be full bottle when he gets back.
Got it. Okay. And then we do have some housekeeping. It is traditional at the end of a term that we elect a new chair. And normally that's done at the first meeting where we have a full house, which will not be at the next meeting, but the one after that. But I will be not here at the next meeting. So as Chair Pro Tem, you will be chairing. And then after that, we'll have a formal election coming up. So. Well,
it's up to you.
yeah, okay, to be discussed with the whole group. Jim, I see the gears
Question,
turning.
yeah, I just have a question, which is, this is basically a rotation, right? So we say election,
Yes.
it's just a rotation.
What, it's a rotation
There was that
customarily.
one year where some of the commissioners thought that they would upset the rotation, but you were very good, I thought, that night, Commissioner Reese.
I like the job.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a rotation. You just come in as as when you were last appointed. So you two will arm wrestle to see who was actually here first.
Well, one thought, sort of in a humorous way, is to put the person who talks the most as chair.
And that shuts them up nicely.
Yeah.
You've won that one, Commissioner Lambert.
I have.
Talking really quick.
Could I suggest, though, that despite the fact that you're gone, that when we have a full commission, the first time we have that election, because it may not be for many meetings after that, we have a full commission again.
Okay.
Well, Commissioner Lambert's going to be away in September, and then other people might be away in October.
That's true. That's true.
Not looking at anyone, but,
Yeah. Well, on the 22nd, or 27th is when we would have a full house, presumably if everybody is healthy and all that. So,
Okay.
Okay, so no written communications. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, the next one we start at 6 and go all night, they say, you know. Welcome back, Jim.